The chamber doors burst inward while her husband's blood remains warm. Aurelia Prisca has lived for 26 years. As Empress of Rome, she remains motionless on her knees, surrounded by an expanding pool of red that destroys her dress and drains her legs of power. The air smells of copper and jasmine, mingling with violence in the smoldering remnants of extinguished candles. From beyond the marble barriers, the sound of metal hitting stone reaches her ears, troops traversing hallways she used to control. Just a quarter of an hour earlier, she sent away a Syrian delegation, authorized a grain delivery, and stood wrapped in purple, as though that hue might protect her. Now that identical color signals her doom. The Praetorian Guard has slaughtered Emperor Decimus Varro Marcellus in his personal bedding. The one who orchestrated his murder steps through the doorway heading her way. A man with broad shoulders, wearing the crimson cloak of the Praetorian Prefect, strides past the corpse without looking down. Known as Gnaeus Cassius Aelianus, only yesterday morning he kissed the emperor's ring and swore everlasting fidelity in the presence of Jupiter. Now in the evening, his gaze evaluates the widow as a trader would assess unreliable goods. He assesses if she retains any worth, if she can be shaped to fulfill fresh objectives, or if she ought to vanish from within the palace. The Senate will be informed that their emperor died from a sudden fever, and with his final breath, designated Titus Flavius Valens as his heir. For the next 3 days within these walls, until Valens appears supported by 3 legions, the Praetorians are accountable to nobody. They control the treasury and the entrances. They possess every hallway, every frightened servant, each woman who started today with safety and is now completely vulnerable. Events that transpire inside an imperial palace within that time frame seldom appear in written records. The historians of antiquity recorded the shift in power, the reprisals, and the payments that secured Praetorian allegiance. They counted the gold given for loyalty and the names erased from memory. What happened to the women caught between a deposed emperor and an incoming one was never documented. These women were confined within the palaces alongside those same men who destroyed their lives. In this video, you'll see what the guards set free after their sacred vow perished with the emperor. You'll observe what Aurelia Priscilla had to give up to protect herself and others. Additionally, you'll witness the sufferings of the palace women before the new ruler arrived in Rome. Before we delve into that 3-day period, we must reveal the structure that created this horror. Leave a comment specifying your city and country of viewing. Spend a moment to subscribe and back this channel. And keep in mind that you're on Ancestral, the premier dark history channel worldwide. To comprehend what Aurelia Priscilla encounters during those harsh hours, you must first grasp the apparatus that will soon crush her completely. Rome's foundation was not philosophy or marble pillars. It relied on armed individuals who were accountable to no judiciary. Within the city, there existed no legal code or moral compass aside from the fancies of their leader. The Praetorian Guard began modestly. Augustus desired faithful troops close at hand. Thus he formed a select guard, initially manageable, chosen veterans, high pay, and top-notch gear. They were positioned nearer to the emperor than his personal shadow. However, such authority never remains limited, especially in Rome. Over time, the guard grew. 9 complete cohorts, stationed permanently in or near the capital. While other legions endured cold and injury on remote borders, the Praetorians relished decent housing. They frequented Roman taverns and observed the political apparatus operate from extremely close range. They discovered which senator loathed which general, which emperor was declining, and which heir could be controlled. The palace entrances and bedroom doorways were under their control. Anyone who wished to see the emperor had to pass by their spears. This no longer defined them as soldiers. They became the key to every important door, and the person holding that key determines who lives to see the other side. When the Praetorians realized this, everything changed. They knew an emperor remained alive only while their weapons were not drawn. Caligula learned this when he was cut to pieces in a corridor. Galba learned it when his skull was cracked open in the Forum after denying them their money. Pertinax tried to eliminate their dishonest practices, and lasted just 3 months before his own guards murdered him. Elagabalus perished with his mother by their actions. Both corpses were hauled through squalid streets and dumped into the Tiber as if they were refuse. In time, the list of emperors slain by their own protectors surpassed those killed by any enemy invasion. Each fresh emperor took the throne already aware that the troops positioned outside his chamber could become his killers. As soon as someone provided more money or a more convincing reason, an emperor's life ended. Regardless of whether death came from a weapon, poison, or natural illness, a single group ruled the ensuing turmoil. It wasn't the Senate, they had no armed forces, nor the city watch, who answered to the guard. Inside Rome's hallowed limits, no external legion was allowed to enter. For a period of hours or days, until the next emperor came with his troops, or his title was officially accepted, the Praetorian Guard controlled the city. There was zero opposition, no balancing force, just soldiers in armor and their commander. This period was politely called the Interregnum, but in reality, it was an anarchic gap where the Guard acted with impunity. An unwritten tradition formed around that vacuum. No law, no vote, no inscription in stone, yet everyone in power knew the expectations. When the previous emperor ceased to live, the Guard insisted on 3 demands. First, a payment taken from the imperial funds, prompt, substantial, and lavish. Second, guarantees that the new emperor would keep their commander in his role, or allow him a dignified exit, never a shameful dismissal. Third, the palace would be their short-term prize. Its furniture, its art, the merchants of aged wine, the servants, and indeed the inhabitants, though ancient writers rarely mention that last part. They recorded the payments and advancements with exact numbers. They told how desperately every fresh emperor hurried to the garrison to hug the soldiers and shove money into their open hands, addressing them as brothers. However, when the topic changed to the female members of the imperial family, the words became vague. A widow peacefully left the royal circle, a daughter retreated into solitude, and a sister adopted a life of meditation. What happened during the interval from the emperor's death to when these women supposedly reached calm choices is almost always left out. That silence is far from peaceful. That gap is crowded with doors broken down, troops judging which women were useful and which weren't, and the commander calculating how much havoc his forces could cause before the next sovereign appeared and saw the damage. The Praetorian Prefect stood at the center of that storm. He usually came from the knight class, not the senatorial order, but his real power surpassed almost all others. He led the only military force within Rome. Numerous emperors gave him authority over legal cases, grain supply, and even diplomatic missions. When rulers were weak, the prefect effectively ran the state. Take Sejanus during Tiberius's reign. He practically governed Rome from the military camp until his dramatic fall. In theory, the prefect was supposed to shield the emperor from the guard and the guard from the emperor. In truth, he walked a tightrope between 2 dangerous forces. If he got too close to the emperor, the troops could destroy them both. If he sided too closely with the soldiers, he risked turning into a kingmaker and making himself a target. When Decimus Varro Marcellus took the throne, the Praetorian Guard was no longer just a protective unit. They had turned into a criminal enterprise. With weapons in hand, they sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. They had already committed murder and knew they could do it again. Furthermore, they understood that the man marching on Rome, Titus Flavius Valens, commander of the Pannonian legions, was ruthless and driven by ambition. He had fought throughout the northern borders. His men adored him. His troops were veterans hardened by combat and intensely loyal. Should he enter the capital without conflict and see that stability had been preserved, he would have no reason to disband the Praetorians. Instead, he would remunerate them, reaffirm their rights, shake the prefect's hand, and declare him Rome's savior. However, there was a problem. Decimus Varro Marcellus was growing suspicious of both Valens and the Praetorians. Over the years, paranoia and secret reports piled up on his desk. Coded messages from governors, informants pointing out bribed officers. Domestic slaves eavesdropped on talks taking place in barracks and bathhouses. The emperor held something far more frightening to the guard than any blade: records, inventories, names, proof. He kept a secret collection of charges and evidence that he didn't dare distribute broadly. He hadn't yet taken action against Valens, but that time drew near. He had publicly discussed the corruption plaguing the Praetorians and the need for a brutal cleansing, and that was enough. Aurelia Priscilla grasped the full picture. She had watched her husband become increasingly tense, cautious, and paranoid. She had spotted the locked chest in his personal study. She had seen him write by his own hand instead of dictating to copyists. She had overheard him say that parchment could be trusted more than any person, and noticed his face grow stern every time he spoke of the Praetorian Guard. She wasn't aware of every name listed in his records, yet she knew the secret archive was real, and that Gnaeus Cassius Aelianus had no clue of its location. That lack of knowledge is the only reason she's still alive after Aelianus leaves her locked in the bedroom with the dead body. The soles of his boots drag blood across the floor tiles. He has one goal: find those documents and eliminate anything that threatens him, his men, or Titus Flavius Valens. The emperor is already dead, but if Valens enters and discovers written evidence of his deal with the guard, he too could be ruined. Aelianus could be executed as a betrayer instead of being hailed as a liberator. That's why he gives Aurelia an ultimatum. By midnight, she must either lead him to the archive or prove she's useless, and useless empress dowagers don't last long. Aurelia hears the bolt click into place. The ensuing quiet is misleading. She hears faint yells, sharp commands, a door breaking down, and a woman's cry cut short. Her stomach knots, but she won't collapse. She pushes herself to stand, her knees aching from the cold marble. Her husband's corpse lies contorted where he fell, eyes still fixed on emptiness. She shuts his eyelids with her fingers, not out of love, but because she can't think clearly when faced with that vacant stare. Next, she moves to the opposite side of the room and presses her hand against the wall. Beyond this stonework, down 2 hallways and around 3 bends, is the emperor's private office. Within that study, hidden behind bookcases and secure drawers, lies everything Aelianus hunts. Aurelia has been inside that chamber many times. She observed Varro use his signet ring on a concealed lever to open a drawer unseen by those unaware of its hiding spot. She recalls the smell of warmed wax and old leather, the neat rows of scrolls tied with colored strings. On the lowest shelf, red for provincial governors, blue for military commanders, black for Praetorians, each wrapped in unmarked cord. The document that caused her husband to turn pale just by mentioning it is the evidence that incriminates Valens. Should those black, unmarked bundles arrive at Aelianus, some men will be ruined while others will thrive. The uncertainty lies in which individuals. The prefect desires them for his own protection and to please Valens. The new emperor will need them to decide who else must be removed or promoted. Aurelia sees it differently. She recognizes the sole leverage she still holds. She cannot summon armies, nor can she decree deaths, but she can decide which documents remain and which are reduced to ashes. If she plays her cards right, the guard and the new emperor may keep her alive a while longer. If she makes a mistake, she and all women tied to her husband will bear the brunt. The idea of those other women hits her with the force of a physical impact. As he left, Aelianus mentioned them offhandedly, as if talking about a list of items: Claudia, her stepdaughter Marcellina, and 3 maids from Varro's private staff. Claudia is 16, the rest in their 20s. Living within these palace grounds under the emperor's protection made them safe for years. Now the assassins view them as spoils. Aelianus conveyed his terms with stark bluntness. If she cooperates, they may be treated gently. If she resists, the guard will do with them as they please. Aurelia imagines Claudia dragged through the palace halls barefoot, scantily clad, pushed into the Praetorian camp. She pictures a room full of armored soldiers who just risked everything, killing the emperor, and now think they deserve a reward. She refuses to let the visions continue. She knows all too well what troops do in captured lands. This interregnum is a battlefield confined inside marble. If she stays inactive, those men will act with total license. For 3 days, if Aelianus allows them to regard the palace as a conquered town, Claudia and the rest will not survive unharmed. Practically speaking, she cannot cry out. She cannot break past the guards. Those outside the door would enjoy that. Instead, she goes back to her husband's corpse, slips the signet ring off his stiffening finger, and pushes it onto her own. It is loose, but that does not matter. The ring holds legal authority. She can use it to order servants around in his name, as they are still unaware of his demise. More importantly, she could appeal to certain holy duties. Rome has rigorous rules concerning dead bodies and funeral rituals. Even the Praetorians would rather not face angry priests declaring they have angered the gods by leaving the emperor unbathed. Aurelia walks to the door and says loudly and deliberately, "Open!" She receives no reply. She hits the wood with the flat of her hand. "In the name of the gods and Roman law, open this door." A moment of silence, then the sound of a bolt being pulled back. A helmeted guard looks in, his face showing a mix of tedium and scorn. 2 more guards stand behind him. Their armor still reeks of sweat and metal. "You are to stay inside, Augusta." The officer states the prefect's commands. The emperor's corpse needs to be tended to. Aurelia replies, her voice steady and somewhat impatient, as if she still holds the upper hand. "If you want the Senate to think he died of a fever, then his corpse cannot show any signs of mistreatment. The priests are going to examine him. Do you want them starting rumors that the guards left him there, bleeding on the floor like an ordinary slave?" The officer hesitates. Before joining the army, he was probably some farmer's son or a shopkeeper's boy. But now he finds himself at the crossroads between a deceased emperor and the ceremonies that validate authority. He is not naive enough to overlook the religious consequences. In Rome, omens matter. A storm arriving at an inopportune time can shake confidence in a new ruler. A rumor that the guards dishonored the emperor's corpse could spread quickly, passed along by servants and freedmen. "I need clean sheets, water, and 2 assistants," Aurelia continues. "They will wash him. I will prepare him for the official display, and then I must be granted entry to the imperial office. The signet ring and his personal seal must be retrieved. You can stand next to me with your sword drawn if that makes you feel better. But if these tasks are ignored, you will bear the consequences, not me. The prefect will not be pleased with your failure." The officer looks back at his men. They stay still. The mood in the palace has shifted. Now every small decision carries risk. At last he partly closes the door. He shouts down the hallway, and voices answer as the door seals again. Aurelia remains by herself with her husband's dead body and her turbulent thoughts. She has moved her first piece only a little, but enough to make the guard consult Aelianus again. Enough to force his return before midnight. She kneels down and dips the edge of a curtain into the blood that has pooled on the floor, soaking the fabric. Then she cleans as much blood as she can from around Varro's injuries, not out of tenderness, but out of strategy. The cleaner the body looks, the more believable the story of sudden illness becomes. A clean corpse suggests a peaceful death. A disfigured one signals murder. Aelianus needs calm. He needs order, but she can deliver both only at a price. Minutes creep by, then the latch scrapes back once more. This time, the person entering is not a low-ranking officer. Gnaeus Cassius Aelianus steps inside, accompanied by guards. He has taken off his helmet, but his hair is still damp with sweat. Fresh, dark stains mark the side of his chest plate. Not all of them are his own. He examines the corpse, then the floor that has been partly cleaned, then Aurelia holding the blood-soaked curtain. His jaw tightens almost unnoticeably. "You act quickly, Augusta," he says. "You set a deadline." She replies, "I have 8 hours to decide whether to hand over what you want or watch you destroy everyone connected to this house. I refuse to waste those hours hiding in a corner." He moves closer until only a few feet separate them. The guards watch without showing any emotion. "Your stepdaughter is in our custody." In a hushed tone, Eliana reports that Claudia Marcellina has undergone questioning. "She cried and begged using your name, and I told her you were reflecting on your choices." Aurelia keeps her calm through sheer willpower. Has she suffered any injury? At present, Aelianus' stare remains steady. The others are similarly resolute, yet my soldiers are becoming restless. They carried out a dangerous mission tonight. They anticipate recompense and won't wait forever. I have the ability to hold them back and announce the palace off limits, with their sole benefit being a wage raise. Alternatively, I might point out specific doors and look away. The decision is fully yours. I've notified your officer that priests are to inspect the corpse. Aurelia states that for your story to withstand examination, you require my involvement, and this room must be sanitized. The study needs safeguarding, and there must be a widow who displays convincing tears in public and recites the correct lines regarding abrupt sickness and tragic bereavement. She says that in return, you ensure Claudia stays clear of the military quarters, and you prevent your troops from approaching the women in this house. You personally accompany me to the study with armed escorts. I will provide what you seek, provided you grasp one essential truth. I alone among the living know exactly the hiding place of each piece of your predicament. Aelianus examines her face, and the strategic thinking is evident in his gaze. He loathes being spoken to in such a manner by a female, and he detests bargaining. Yet he equally abhors ambiguity. Outside these walls, Valens advances alongside seasoned legions, and inside this palace there are documents that can end professional standings and snuff out existences. You'll take me to the Imperial archives, he declares at last, all of them without exception. Should I get any inkling you've hidden something, I'll send Claudia to the military camp and not step in a second time. Do you understand that clearly? Yes, replies Aurelia. Her heart is thudding so forcefully she can sense it in her throat. However, you also need to comprehend my position. The moment you view the contents of those files, you'll realize something significant. I'm not your prisoner. I'm the sole individual capable of aiding you in surviving the upcoming emperor. Aelianus gestures to his soldiers. One gives Aurelia a cloak, while another fully unlocks the door beyond. The hallway extends into a darkness colored red by torch flames, flanked by Praetorian headgear and unforgiving gazes. The route to the Emperor's study passes through this metallic passageway. At the far end sits a room containing mysteries that could either ruin the man stepping next to her or make him untouchable. Aurelia steps over the threshold. Already determining which documents will remain and which will burn, she knows that if she errs by even a single name, Claudia and the rest will sacrifice their physical selves and their lives. And while Aelianus escorts her to the study, she becomes aware of another fact. One of the papers in that hidden compartment. It poses no danger to the guard. Instead, it endangers Titus Flavius Valens himself. And if Aelianus uncovers it, the future emperor of Rome might not survive the journey to the capital. The passageway past the emperor's sleeping quarters has morphed into an unidentifiable state. It gives the impression of conquered land. Headgear, shields, unsheathed swords. Those men who yesterday would have stood at rigid attention now lean against the walls with a nonchalance that causes Aurelia's skin to tingle. Their discipline is still there, but their self-control has disappeared. They hold her eyes without flinching. A few examine her features. Others observe the purple hem of her dress, as if estimating how much longer she can wear it. Aelianus strides next to her as if this were a standard checkup. He doesn't make physical contact. There's no necessity. 2 guards walk behind, 2 lead the way, and additional soldiers are stationed at regular distances along the corridor. The meaning is clear without words. She will go only where he accepts. She will see only what he permits. And the entire palace will observe that the prefect, not the emperor's widow, now controls movement. The initial rooms they pass are for lower-level servants. Doors are left ajar, storage boxes are emptied and broken, clothes tossed over floors, small private items shoved into corners. Aurelia sees a broken clay statue on the tiles, a child's plaything crushed under a metal boot. A young kitchen worker kneels by the wall, hands locked behind his head, blood dripping from a cut lip, while a Praetorian towers above him. The soldier laughed at something the boy muttered, But the laughter stops immediately when Aelianus shows up. The man stands upright, gives a salute, and adjusts his face as the prefect walks by. That facade will fall. This is the usual pattern of the Interregnum. On the night a leader dies, the guards do not wait for legal procedures. They create their own provisional rules. Future historians will note mundane statements such as, "The changeover occurred without incident." They refer to the absence of street conflicts, that no flames destroyed the forum, that no opposing armies clashed. They never consider events in servants' hallways and locked rooms as disturbances, and they never need to pass the corridor leading to the imperial family's private quarters. Aurelia's heart tightens as she catches sight of Claudia's door. Two soldiers are now stationed there like stone statues. The young woman's maid huddles close by, eyes red from crying, a bruise forming on her jaw. Upon seeing Aurelia, she starts to get up, then stops when a guard places his hand on his blade. "Hold on, Claudia," Aurelia commands, stopping suddenly, her tone coming out more harshly than she meant. "Is she within?" Aelianus doesn't even glance at the door. "She's right where I informed you," he states while breathing and responding to questions. The duration she stays in that state is fully dependent on how well tonight goes. "She's only 16, Aurelia protests, "and she has no part in your plots." But that's not how conspiracies work. Aeliana's responses infect whole households. "You see this tactic?" He does look at the maid, but only with a quick, cold evaluation. The soldier removes his hand from his sword. The woman lowers herself back to the ground. Aelianus hasn't commanded that she be struck, nor has he ordered her defense, so both options stay open. The reminder is intentional. They move further into the palace's forbidden area. There are fewer attendants here, more troops, and more locked doors. At night, this wing ought to be quiet and calm. Instead, it buzzes with hushed conversations, footsteps, and the occasional brittle sound of something fragile hitting a wall, a plate, a lamp, or a vase that just yesterday was treated like a prized heirloom. At the far end of the corridor lies the emperor's private study, concealed behind a plain wooden door. It deliberately lacks the splendor of the throne room or audience chambers. Power in this room comes not from marble or gold, but from the words written on parchment. Two extra Praetorians stand guard at the door and step aside as soon as they spot Aelianus. One guard holds a ring of keys taken from the steward, yet the door's lock lacks any visible keyhole. There is only a bronze plate and a small carved insignia. The soldier's confusion is unmistakable. This door can only be opened by the emperor. Aeliana turns to Aurelia and says, "Now it's your turn." Aurelia lifts her husband's signet ring. The gold feels alien and heavy on her finger. She presses the ring's engraved side into the bronze plate. As it rotates within the wood, a mechanism catches with a distinct click, unlocking the door. The guards flinch faintly at the noise. Even those who have killed emperors can feel small in the face of such craftsmanship. The study smells of ink, settled dust, and old wax. Every wall is lined floor to ceiling with shelves crammed with scrolls and tablets. In the center stands a huge table, its top marked by decades of wear. To one side, a brazier full of coals glows dimly. Above, a plain lamp casts a soft amber circle. This room is not for ceremony. It's a workspace for running an empire through paperwork. Aelianus steps in first, quickly scanning every corner. He seems neither impressed by the shelves nor comfortable. He then orders the guards, "Both of you stay by the door. No one comes in unless I give a direct order. If she tries to leave without me, kill her." The men nod and close the door, sealing it. This leaves Aurelia and the prefect isolated in the emperor's most secure room. The click of the latch cuts off the sounds of the palace as sharply as a knife. For the first time since her husband's death, Aurelia is alone with the man who orchestrated his murder, with no other witnesses. "Show me everything," Aelianus says. The urge to outright lie is strong. To say the emperor burned his records, moved them to a temple, or to a senator's house. But such a lie would quickly fall apart, since too many know Varro spent long hours working here alone. Too many scribes have brought in blank tablets and seen them come out filled. Aelianus is brutal, not stupid. If she tries to deny him what he wants, He will systematically break her down until she gives in. And one more thing, Claudia, the three household women and the names of anyone she might be hiding. He walks toward the closest shelf, acting as if he's just obeying. She takes out a bundle tied with a red ribbon. The tablets inside have Varro's neat handwriting. Names of provincial governors, numbers, bribes, tax revenues that were siphoned off and hidden. She recalls her husband's disgust as he compiled this dossier. He hadn't acted on it yet. He wanted an airtight trap before making his move. Provincials, she says. Governors, corruption. Aelianus gives the names only a brief glance. Get rid of it, he instructs. Those men will be needed by the coming emperor, who already has his preferred individuals. Aurelia sets the bundle down on the table. Using a thin candle lit from the fire, Aelianus holds its tip against the rim of the uppermost tablet. The wax starts to melt. The parchment turns dark and begins to curl. It then bursts into flames. The prefect observes until the blaze destroys the names that once spread terror across entire regions. After a nod from him, she passes over the package tied with a blue ribbon. Documents about generals who disobeyed commands and legates who embezzled soldiers' pay. Officers who filed glowing reports despite losing battles. Aelianus studies this set more carefully. Some of these men are his opponents, others his supporters. He sets a few aside before throwing the rest into the fire. He points to a name, saying this one is dead. Another owes him something, and this one will turn fiercely loyal once he discovers this document was destroyed. Right in front of her, he rebuilds his own web of influence. Every scroll he saves or burns pushes him further into the net that Varro created. Yet now under his own conditions, is that all there is? Do you understand what I'm looking for? He inquires. I need the records about my soldiers, my officers, myself, and Valens. He says the last name out loud, dropping it between them like a hurled rock. Aurelia goes beyond the obvious shelves and the neat lines of tagged packages, heading to the back wall behind the desk. Anyone else would see ordinary wall panels, but she sees something different. Her fingers run along the wood trim until she finds a minuscule flaw, a secret known only to her and Varro. She pushes. A faint clicking sound follows, and a thin piece of paneling slides out a few inches, revealing a shallow cavity. Inside lie 3 piles of documents. One stack is tied with a black cord, another with simple rope. The third has no cord. It's just rolled up tightly and kept together by a single leather strap. Aelianus moves nearer, suddenly focused. What are these? Black refers to the Praetorian Guard. Aurelia explains that plain represents the Senate, and the unmarked scroll is Valens. Instead of going for the last, she picks the black one. Handing over everything at once would mean losing all her leverage. Giving it out piece by piece might let her keep some power. The black documents turn out to be even more incriminating than she thought. One sworn statement after another, intelligence from spies inside the Praetorian barracks, memos from freedmen who drink with officers and eavesdrop when they become talkative. Financial records written in Varro's precise handwriting. Aelianus scans the pages quickly, his jaw tensing. She observes his gaze traveling along a sentence, then rising to the wall as he connects the information to his existing knowledge. A scroll names a tribune who took a bribe from a senator to overlook unlawful grain deliveries. Another details a centurion who secretly peddled arms from the imperial armory to a gang of criminals. A longer document describes a rendezvous between 2 Praetorian units and a messenger from Valens, which occurred months before the emperor discovered the dates and venues. A servant who served their drinks recalled the precise conversation. Upon reaching that document, Aelianus presses his lips together. He met them without my permission. He mutters, "That treacherous snake," under his breath, meaning his own tribune, not Valens. Aurelia asks, how much is your camp aware of what your officers do when you are not watching? He ignores the question and organizes the scrolls into 3 stacks, one for burning, another for keeping. A small stack requires immediate action. When finished, he has enough leverage over his own men to control them for years. This entire archive, he says almost to himself, was a blade held to my throat. Had he called a meeting and read even half of this, The guard would have splintered. Some would have sided with me, others with my enemies, and still others would have defected to Valens out of sheer fear. He raises his eyes. You understand. This gives me the chance to cleanse my ranks. It gives you the chance to turn every soldier in your camp into your prisoner. Aurelia says, if you survive long enough to exploit it. His attention sharpens at her remark. He is riding the wave of sudden control, having just grabbed the strings attached to powerful men. She pushes a different thought into that moment. You are still vulnerable. She lets her fingers hover above the plain rope bundle. Senate files. She knows what they contain. Names of men who conspired to block legislation. Men who declared piety openly while secretly plotting with generals. Men who wrote flattering speeches for Varro and contemptuous letters about him to one another. Valens will want parts of this. She says he will want to know which senators privately celebrated his ascension while publicly mourning. He will want to know who can be trusted and who needs close surveillance. With this material, you could split half the Senate into warring factions. And the final roll? Aeliana asks. Now this is the edge. The unmarked roll is not thick, but it is deadly. Inside are copies of letters, a detailed report from a provincial officer, and a list of witnesses who saw what happened. It happened in a small town on the Danube frontier, a town that no longer exists. Months ago, Valens surrounded that town after a minor rebellion. The leaders surrendered under a promise of mercy. They were Roman citizens who believed loyalty to Rome would protect them. Valens had them executed anyway, not in battle but after they had disarmed. He ordered their families expelled and their property confiscated. He wrote to the emperor about a necessary example. He failed to mention the Roman citizenship of the dead. He failed to mention that some had old connections in Rome, men in the Senate who now mourned in secret. Varro discovered the truth. A centurion, sickened by what he witnessed, sent a report through a chain of contacts. The emperor was furious. Killing foreign enemies in combat was acceptable, but killing Roman citizens who had surrendered was something entirely different. It contravened laws that emperors usually claimed to respect, and also risked stirring up trouble among the legions, who detested slaughtering fellow citizens on such a scale. If those specifics fell into the wrong hands, Valens's image as a valiant border general would crumble. Varro had planned to wield it carefully. He intended to exert pressure in one area, issue demands in another, compelling Valens to decelerate and become more wary. He might even relieve him of certain commands if he exceeded his bounds. He had taken no action until now. Now he never would have the chance. Aurelia has perused every line of that scroll twice, and she understands it pertains to more than just faraway killings. It exposes the true nature of Titus Flavius Valens. He is the sort who shatters commitments when they become troublesome, and who murders the defenseless and then calls it strength. He is the sort to employ the guard for as long as they served his purposes, and then discard them the moment they alarmed him. She cannot completely entrust that weapon to Aeliana. Should he be the sole controller, he may either bury it forever or use it to make himself untouchable as Valens' extortionist. Both outcomes spell ruin for Aurelia. She unrolls the first portion of the Valens file, enough to reveal the seal, handwriting, and opening lines of the report. She does not expose the list of witnesses at the end. Read it, she orders. Aelianus takes the scroll and begins to examine it. His expression remains unchanged at the first mention of a rebellious town. He has seen many such references. It tightens slightly when citizens are brought up. It actually freezes at the assertion that they surrendered under oath and were afterward executed. He slowly lifts his gaze and asks, "Is this confirmed?" "Yes," Aurelia responds. "Multiple witnesses." Varro had them transferred to separate units and scattered, but he preserved their names in a location not within this room. She is lying. The names are on the final third of the scroll. She withholds a portion and waits to see if he notices the scroll's thickness. In her grip, he examines the object again. If this is authentic, if she interrupts, you command men who risk their lives. How do you imagine they will feel about an emperor who slaughters his own unarmed citizens after promising them safety? How will they feel? If that man orders a guard to suppress unrest in the city, and you hesitate, knowing how far he is willing to go? Aelianus remains silent. He is thinking ahead. He envisions meetings where Valens sits on a throne and looks at him as a tool that may have outlived its usefulness. He imagines a moment when Valens declares the guard has grown too powerful, unsettling the Senate and requiring reform. "What do you want?" he finally says. Those words are not a threat. "A question first," Aurelia says. "Keep your soldiers out of the women's quarters, not just Claudia's, but everyone's. No accidental intrusions, no rough interrogations. You want Rome calm when Valens arrives, and you do not want rumors that the guard turned the palace into a barracks brothel. Servants talk, freedmen talk, and those stories spread into the city faster than commands." Irritation flashes in Eliana's eyes. "My men will expect gold," she cuts in. "For their actions this evening, they can anticipate gold, promotions, and immunity. Thanks to those documents, you have everything needed to grant those rewards." She gestures to the stacks on the table. "The women atop them are unnecessary unless you lack the strength to manage them." The barb hits its mark. He moves a step nearer, lowering his voice. "Do not confuse my tolerance with frailty. Prove me wrong, then." Aurelia suggests setting a rule. Decree that any warrior found in the female quarters without proper written permission will be executed. Leverage the intel you've just gained, pick a disposable individual, and make an example. Terror will handle the rest. For a few moments, he fixes his gaze on her. He is not used to being given orders on how to lead his own soldiers, especially from a woman whose fate he controls. Yet she has wounded him in the area that counts, his identity as a commander. A man incapable of controlling his troops during an interim period does not deserve the rank of prefect. He stands by as a mere observer. "All right," he responds. "That is condition number 1. What more?" "You will not reveal my husband's sickness just yet," she replies. "You will wait until the corpse is prepared, and I am ready to face the Senate and the populace. I will play the role of the mourning widow. I will shed tears at the right time and portray his passing as calm." "Do you really need that act? You don't want the city in chaos before Valens shows up. And in exchange for that and your help here, you retain this." He raises the scroll of Valen. "I keep the rest," she states. "What you are holding is enough to unsettle you, but not enough to ruin Valen. The identities of witnesses, the precise spots of the graves, the full testimony that remains with me. Whether I ever share it with anyone relies on 2 individuals, you and Valens." Eliana's face stiffens. "You think you can pit us against one another?" "I believe I can ensure we all survive," Aurelia responds. "Tomorrow you can enter that camp and welcome Valens as the person who cleared the way to the throne for him. You can hand him the documents that harm his adversaries and prove your worth. You can imply that perilous tales exist regarding a border event and that you have kept them under control. He will be indebted to you and afraid of you, but only if those tales are not entirely in your hands. If they are, he will dedicate his entire rule to finding methods to remove you." He is weighing his options, and she observes it in how his grip tightens around the scroll. He pictures the dialogue, the expression of the new emperor, the unspoken query, "What exactly does this man know?" "What you are proposing," Aelianus says deliberately, "is that I intentionally leave a danger to the emperor in your power, so that removing me would endanger his own downfall." "Yes," Aurelia states, "just as I am permitting a menace to myself to remain under your authority." She points to the stacks of evidence connecting her husband's ring to betrayals. "If I make a mistake, you can attribute it all to me. Assert I influenced Varro. Assert I hid documents. You can still execute me in the public square if needed. Whether we want it or not, we're tied together. That's the reality. No compliments, no entreaties, just a harsh recognition of shared peril." For an instant, the room's only noise is the parchment burning. Outside, room by room, the palace keeps being passed from one control to another. Somewhere along the hallway, a shout breaks the quiet. A hefty item thuds onto the ground, and a female voice lifts before being muffled. Aelianus looks at the door, then back at Aurelia, and he's fully aware of what's happening outside. The transition period is trying to take its usual fee. According to him, if I remove my soldiers from the women's wing, it's contingent on keeping Claudia and the others unharmed. What assurance do I have that you won't run to Valens as soon as he shows up and hand over all you own? None, Aurelia replies. No assurance exists, just reason. If I keep the equilibrium between you both, I'll live. If I grant one of you total advantage over the other, I become a nuisance. I'm many things, Prefect, but not stupid. That direct truth takes away his guard far better than any extravagant promise could. She doesn't vow allegiance. She pledges self-interest, and he understands that. He walks to the door, opening it slightly. You, he snaps at the closest guard. Dispatch a courier to the camp. My command. Any Praetorian found in the women's wing lacking written permission must be apprehended and delivered to me. Taking effect right now, spread among the cohorts. I'll label the first person caught as a traitor and have him whipped at the gates before daybreak. The guard blinks, nods, then rushes off. Within minutes, the directives will spread outward, and terror will move more swiftly than any documented command. Aurelia exhales slowly. She hadn't noticed she was holding that breath. Claudia hasn't been saved yet. A regulation is not an impenetrable barrier. People can break it, but they'll pause. And that pause could mean the difference between living and being destroyed. Aelianus shuts the door once more and faces her again. The brief alliance hardens in his gaze into distrust. You will duplicate this document, he states, brandishing the incomplete Valens scroll. By your own hand, by tonight, a neat copy. The original goes into my possession. Your copy is left wherever you like. Thus, we each keep a knife at the other's neck. He's trying to reclaim command, trying to build his own influence. Clever. Risky. I'll need ink and writing boards, Aurelia says, and some time. And I won't do it while Claudia is still held captive in the barracks. You don't have the standing to set all the conditions. He retorts, you only just told your troops that you do. She answers, don't contradict that within the same hour. It makes you look feeble. For an instant, a shadow crosses his face. She's convinced she has gone too far. This time his hand goes to his sword grip with meaning. Here's what you don't understand, he says softly, moving nearer. I can still put a stop to this, and I can keep what I've got. I will kill you, discard your corpse with the rest, and inform Valens that the Emperor's widow lost her mind from grief and burned her husband's documents. He'll buy it because it suits him. I put up with you because you're of use, not because you're indispensable. He pulls the blade halfway out of its sheath. The lamplight reflects off steel. He's near enough now that she senses the faint stir of air as it glides free. Aurelia doesn't step back. Her heart pounds. Sweat forms at the back of her neck. She realizes that if she recoils, if she pleads, she'll prove every scornful belief he holds about imperial women. She forces herself to look him in the eye. If your plan was to kill me, she states, you'd have done it in the bedroom. You brought me here because you're frightened of what's inside these walls. You're holding that sword because you're frightened of what's inside me. For the first time since entering the study, Gnaeus Cassius Aelianus's composure cracks. It's a tiny break, yet it's noticeable. The sword leaves its sheath in a single, smooth motion. He points it not at the stacks of scrolls, but at the tender spot just under Aurelia's chin. Then he closes the gap so swiftly that she has no room to move. The sword's tip rests against her skin, cold. One slight movement, and her throat will be cut. Aelianus stands near enough to spot a thin streak of someone else's blood on his cheek. His eyes show no madness. They look calculated. He's studying her once more, exactly as he did in the bedroom, weighing, probing. Repeat it, he whispers. Tell me, I'm scared. He desires those words so he can retaliate, so he can convince himself he's still in charge. Aurelia understands that. She also grasps something else. He wouldn't risk slitting her throat. In this room filled with paper and fire, blood on these scrolls would spoil his prize. You're scared, she states. Besides, her voice stays steady. Not of me, but of what's recorded here. Of Valens, of your own troops. If that weren't true, you wouldn't be waving that sword at the only person who can aid your survival. A long pause hangs between them. Her heartbeat roars in her ears. His arm stays still. Then the metal pulls away from her skin and drives into the wooden table beside her. His hand sinks far enough into the grain to stay upright on its own. The lamp shakes, and a pile of tablets slips sideways. You're confusing calculation with fear, he states, but you're right about one thing. Killing you now would cost me more than I gain. He yanks the blade out and cleans it on the edge of his cloak. The message needs no interpretation. He decided against cutting her, yet the gap between that decision and an alternative is nearly non-existent. Our argument is over, he states. This is how it will happen. You are to prepare the Emperor's corpse, produce the final version of this report on Valens, and complete it this evening. You will store the rest of the information you assert you possess in a location accessible only to you. In exchange, I will prevent my troops from entering the women's quarters and ensure Claudia and the others remain unharmed. Those are my conditions. Break them, and I will annihilate you. Aurelia inquires, and if you violate them? He nearly grins. Then you shall do what imperial widows have always done, either endure it or perish. He calls the guards back. The study's silence is broken once more by footsteps on stone. Through the open door come the noises of the palace. Nearby, a woman is weeping. In the distance, a single scream rings out and then falls silent. Aelianus gives the incomplete Valens roll to a guard and signals that Aurelia requires ink, a stylus, tablets, and 2 loyal attendants from her own household. Escort her to the bedchamber and no one else. She is to work in that location. Should anyone bother her without my seal, you will be held accountable. And the guard acknowledges with a nod. The directive is clear. Guard her not for her own welfare, but for the sake of what she will write. Under guard, Aurelia retraces her steps through the hallways. The palace appears even more devastated. Additional doors are ajar, more items lie broken, more people have their faces against the walls. The Praetorians position themselves where they wish, with weapons held casually, aware that nobody can oppose them. Throughout this time, a few people cast a glance at her, notice the prefect's shadow at her side, and avert their gaze. Rumors are already circulating. The widow is no longer just a target. She has become a valuable resource. Inside the bedchamber, 2 servants wait, their faces pale. They bow so rapidly that their hair covers their eyes. Behind them stands Decimus Varro. Marcellus remains lying on the floor where he fell. His blood is darkening, and the pungent odor has dissipated. The visual remains unchanged. We will raise him onto the bed. Aurelia says softly, "Then you shall cleanse him. Do not utter a word in the presence of the guards. Refrain from repeating anything you hear within these walls. If you do, every one of us will perish." They nod once more, as terror has already instructed them on how to comply with the guards. They fetch what she asked for: ink, a stylus, clean tablets. Then they station themselves at the doorway, keeping watch on the corridor. The palace has transformed into a prison, teeming with armed soldiers. Within this solitary chamber, she has a minor task to complete that could shift the odds of survival in someone's favor. Inside that enclosure, they reposition her husband's corpse. The servants cleanse his skin, clothe him in a fresh tunic and toga, and adjust his limbs. The injuries are still apparent, yet the blood has been cleaned from his face. He appears almost serene. It is a falsehood, but a beneficial one. Upon viewing him on his bier, the Senate will observe a man who might have succumbed to fever. Should they decide to accept the tale, peace will prevail. If they refuse, chaos will engulf the city before Valens arrives at the gates. Aurelius takes a seat at a tiny lamplit table and starts composing. The report on Valens is concise, yet packed with information. She transcribes each line detailing the town, the capitulation, the killings, the seizures. She duplicates the officer's objection and Valens's frigid reply. Her script is neat and unembellished, like that of a weary copyist, free of ornate strokes or secret cues. Only the facts. She omits the witness roster and the records of their destinations. Those details go onto another parchment piece in a distinct handwriting. Once the pristine document is done, she compacts it until it disappears in her hand. She smooths the ink, dusts off the residue, and rolls it tidily. This is the draft Aelianus will receive, potent enough to alarm, yet insufficient alone to incriminate Valens. The slip bearing the names poses a separate issue. She casts a look at the guards. Their gaze is fixed on the hallway, not her hands. They appear weary, yet vigilant for any disturbance. Moving to the bedside, Aurelia straightens the emperor's cloak as though fixing a wrinkle, prompting the attendants to step back. She slips the folded paper under the side of his corpse, nestled between the fabric and the bedding. Corpses cannot talk, yet they can harbor objects that the living wish to conceal. When the priests arrive tomorrow to ready the remains for public viewing, they will discover it. She has selected the appropriate clergyman. The pontifex, who secretly loathes Valens over a distant cousin killed on that border, has always doubted the frontier commander's renown. He will grasp the importance of that slip and the peril it entails. She goes back to the table with an expressionless face. The task is complete, she informs the guard closest to her. Deliver this to the prefect. He accepts the scroll and departs. The door stays under guard. The inaugural night of the Interregnum goes by in disjointed intervals. Aurelia nods off in a seat, jolting alert with each sudden sound. Servants come and go, fetching water and fresh linen, whispering prayers under the impression she is not listening. Sometime before daybreak, a fresh shriek pierces the palace, nearer than before, followed by yells. The dull impact of bodies against stone, a horse's pained neigh, followed by the repeated snap and slap of a whip, then stillness. The sentries outside Aurelia's chamber exchange looks. "Who?" one whispers. "And Marcus," the other replies quietly. Some fool attempted to sneak into the women's quarters, and the prefect ordered him hauled to the courtyard and lashed before the company. Aurelia shuts her eyes. Marcus is merely a moniker, not an individual she recognizes. Yet the signal is clear. Aelianus is not merely threatening, he is leveraging the initial night to discipline his troops before their instincts take over. Near dawn, a shift sweeps across the palace. Fewer shouts, more marching, orders snapped in precise tones. The soldiers are transitioning from pillaging to patrolling. They have sampled authority and are now compelled to fall in line. This is the tactic of a shrewd prefect in the quiet hours before sunrise. Allow the troops enough plunder to sense they have been rewarded, then rein them in before they wreck something vital. By noon, the second day of the Interregnum starts in the public eye. The Senate has been called. The official narrative is ready. Aurelia dresses in black for mourning. Her hair is covered. Her complexion is pallid, but not excessively so. She has rehearsed the speech she intends to deliver. She will avoid any mention of blades or bloodstains on the marble floor. She will speak of a sudden fever, of brave perseverance, and of a last dignified breath that named Titus Flavius Valens as the heir. 2 Praetorian guards accompany her to the Curia, neither harshly nor tenderly. Immediately outside the forum, the area is packed yet silent. Word has already spread throughout the city like wildfire. The populace is aware that the guard was active during the night. They realize that something is amiss. They wait to see whether what follows will be a structured declaration or turmoil. Within the Curia, the senators are seated in their assigned position. Numerous senators have somber expressions. A few appear genuinely unsettled. Others seem relieved, while still more fidget nervously, assessing what this means for their political ties. Aurelia spots individuals whose names appeared in those simple, cord-bound Senate records. As she walks by, they avert their gazes. They are uncertain whether their confidential information was destroyed or preserved. She settles onto a small, elevated chair, designated for imperial women during emergencies. Nearby, Aelianus is positioned in complete battle gear. His red cloak stands out vividly against the gray stone. The senators view him as the one who maintained discipline. They remain unaware of the bloodshed he has already caused. Within the palace, they observe his composed bearing and assured stance, as the senior consul begins the proceedings. His voice resonates faintly throughout the hall. He declares that the emperor has died from a disease. He extols the emperor's virtues and alludes to his shortcomings without specifying them. He recites a couple of verses concerning the transience of human existence. It is all routine. Rome has performed this numerous times before. Then he motions toward Aurelia. The Augusta will recount the final moments of our departed emperor. She stands up. For an instant, every gaze in the room shifts to her. Once more, she envisions her spouse gasping on his own blood as blades pierced his body. She pushes the vision aside. Instead, she focuses on the story that must endure. She speaks with clarity. She talks deliberately, explaining how a fever seized him suddenly. She mentions that the emperor summoned the priests and requested her presence. She recounts how he talked about the Republic, the importance of stability, and his faith in the border legions. She states that he designated Valens as his successor, encouraged the Praetorians and the Senate to back him, and passed away with Rome's name on his lips. Though it is false, it serves a purpose. While speaking, she allows her gaze to linger a brief moment too long on particular senators. Those whose names were stored in that archive had handwritten letters detailing how they might realign their allegiance should the appropriate general march on Rome. They will sense that gaze and question whether she is aware, and they will reconsider any premature schemes with the future emperor. After she concludes, there is silence in the hall. Some men wipe their eyes. Others briefly meet Aelianus' gaze with quick looks. They are verifying whether the prefect endorses this account. He reveals no expression, yet that lack of response speaks volumes. The Senate casts its vote to affirm Valens as emperor, and the measure passes without difficulty. No senator wishes to be noted as an opponent of the man who will shortly arrive in the city. He will advance at the front of battle-hardened soldiers as a Praetorian guard forms ranks along the roads. The following day is occupied with duties. Priests conduct ceremonies over Varro's remains and discover the folded parchment beneath his dead body, exactly where Aurelia had placed it. The former pontiff, who loathes Valens, reveals nothing in front of others. Privately, he peruses the list of names and the evidence, his lips pressing together. He dispatches a reliable attendant to conceal the strip far within the temple's records. It is filed under a heading that carries no significance for anyone unaware of what to seek. Meanwhile, in the Praetorian barracks, Aelianus conducts an alternative ceremony. He calls for tribunes and centurions in clusters, never gathering them simultaneously. Several depart from his chambers looking pale and perspiring, relieved of their responsibilities but still breathing. Others exit with smirks, advanced in rank, their purses fuller. One individual never leaves. By sunset, his corpse hangs from a beam in the courtyard. A formal declaration is affixed to his chest, labeling him a traitor for dereliction of duty and insubordination during a period of change. The accusations are vague enough to imply anything. All the spectators grasp the true implication. The prefect holds authority over the records. Those records determine your destiny. Later that evening, Claudia Marcellina is brought back to the palace. Aurelia encounters her in a side chamber, under the watch of 2 Praetorian guards and one of Aeliana's own aides. Claudia has disheveled hair, dark circles under her eyes, and a clean dress with a torn sleeve. She flings herself toward Aurelia and breaks into tears. "I was taken to the camp," she pants. "They placed me in a room and inquired about father, about you, about uncles, and the names of cousins. They repeatedly questioned whether you had concealed anything. One of them told me that before the night ended, I would understand what being an emperor's daughter truly meant." Her hands tremble while she attempts to speak. She gulps nervously. Then the prefect arrived. In full view of everyone, he slapped the man who made that remark across the face. He declared that anyone who laid a hand on me would be flogged and banished from the guard. Following that incident, they merely continued asking questions. They did not. Her voice catches as she trails off. Aurelia embraces her more firmly. Claudia remains unharmed, though shaken, still intact. That's more than many daughters of the empire could expect on such a night. The officer behind them adjusts his stance. The prefect is true to his word, he states without emotion. for the moment, but you both understand how guards behave under new rulers. When Valens arrives, he might disregard any pledges given prior to his entry into the city. Aurelia gazes at him. "What is your name?" "Quintus Fabius, Primus Pilus of the first cohort," he replies. "Remember this, Quintus Fabius." She remarks that if Valens perceives the guard as a threat, he won't begin with anonymous infantry. Instead, he'll go after the leaders, men like you and the prefect, if you wish to survive long enough to meet your grandchildren. You should pray the equilibrium we're creating lasts. He scoffs, but chooses not to contradict. He is well aware of the consequences when emperors feel threatened, having witnessed it firsthand. On the third morning, word arrives. Valens's scouts have been sighted. He'll be in the city before nightfall. Rome is in motion once more. The guards buff their armor and assemble in precise rows along the streets, spears gleaming, shields positioned perfectly. The urban cohorts are relegated to the rear. The populace congregates in the sheltered areas among the columns. Priests ready their incense. The senators practice the shouts they'll make upon the new emperor's arrival. Aurelia observes from a palace balcony. Next to her, Claudia is veiled in dark fabric, partially obscuring her face. Behind them, a row of palace women remains silent, their destinies hinging on the coming events. The city gates swing open, and in rides Titus Flavius Valens. He embodies everything the legions admire, broad of shoulder, worn by time, with a scar running down one cheek. His armor shows signs of wear. It's not ornamental. Trailing him, his officers advance, their cloaks stained by frontier conditions. The crowd applauds, but their cheers express relief rather than happiness. A fresh emperor signals that the crisis is easing, at least temporarily. Aelianus stands at the forefront of the Praetorian ranks. He salutes, fist against chest, spear pointed downward. His troops drop to their knees in a synchronized movement as Valens passes. The former general, now emperor, lifts a hand in recognition, a slight yet significant action. Its message: I acknowledge your display. I'll determine your fate later. That afternoon, the initial confidential discussion is held in a fortified chamber within the palace. Valens is seated across from Aelianus at a table. No longer in armor, only tunics and cloaks, both men burdened by their mutual knowledge. A scroll rests between them. "The uncensored version of your report, so I'm informed," Valens remarks, tapping the document. That this originated from the emperor's personal records. He compiled extensive notes on those in his circle. "He certainly did," Aelianus replies. "Most are now destroyed. They were obsolete, worthless." Valens inquires, "And what about this one?" Aelianus responds, "This pertains to you, an event on the Danube, a village that no longer exists." Valens grins. "Marginal border affairs." Aelianus retorts, "It's not a matter for urbanites, yet it worries those who might misunderstand it." Valens queries, "In the Senate, there are members whose relatives and dependents reside there. Priests oppose Rome executing surrendered individuals. Officers fret over commands that breach boundaries. And what about you? Does that notion trouble you?" "I favor order," Aelianus states. "I prefer unambiguous lines of authority." She adds, "I appreciate troops understanding their duties and the consequences of defiance." Valens reclines and remarks, "You might have destroyed this." He asks, "You could have exploited this to cause discord, yet you opted to deliver it to me. Why?" Aelianus replies, "Because I wish to serve a ruler who recognizes the hidden arsenals. And also I anticipate retaining my role as prefect, granted complete control over the guard, free from relentless suspicion." Valens fixes his gaze upon him, the atmosphere growing tense. Valens speaks deliberately. "You understand that by retaining this document, you demonstrate you might have withheld other items." Aelianus answers, "I might have, but in this instance, I refrained." Consider the reason Valens re-examines the parchment. He is aware this is not the complete account, regardless of how neatly the document is composed. It appears unfinished. Additional names, further specifics, someone somewhere should exist. Who possesses them? Abruptly, Valens demands in the palace, "Where is the emperor's widow?" Eliana responds, "She is getting ready for your initial public appearance. She fulfilled her duties. She portrayed your rise to power as his final desire, soothed the Senate, and assisted me in maintaining tranquility in the city." "And what about his documents? Every single one?" Valens inquires. Aelianus holds his gaze unwaveringly and replies, "Either destroyed or in your possession." This statement is neither wholly accurate nor entirely false. Valens allows a pause. Having conquered cities previously, he understands that not all concealed stores are discovered on the initial day. He retrieves the scroll and rolls it securely. He declares, "You will keep your position for the time being. The guard shall get the promised bonus, 3 years' wages from the treasury." Aelianus nods. "They will be satisfied. They ought to remain faithful." Valens states, "I am neither Galba nor Pertinax. I am aware of the fate that befalls rulers who attempt to restructure the guard without comprehending it." Tapping the scroll in your head, he adds, "If ever forced to decide between this, I will opt for the narrative that preserves my reign." The menace is evident, as is the recognition. They are now linked through mutual secrets and mutual peril. Subsequently, Valens calls upon the imperial women, as is customary. The new ruler must appear to comfort the widow and pay respects to the former dynasty. Upon his entry, Aurelia genuflects. Claudia follows suit behind her, and the remaining women avert their gaze. Valens raises Aurelia by the arm. His hold is strong, but not harsh. He scrutinizes her features with the straightforwardness of a military man. "You have rendered service to Rome by maintaining order throughout these times." He remarks, "This has been reported to me by the Senate, the Guard, and the priests. You shall be commended for your actions." Aurelia states, "Rome requires tranquility. Fear nourishes adversaries." He nods and responds, "Your words suggest you comprehend authority." She says, "I was wedded to it. I observed its effects on my spouse and the kind of individuals it drew in." At that final term, a subtle darkness passes over his face. He refrains from inquiring about her intent. He declares, "I plan to bestow upon you a comfortable, well-guarded villa outside the city, where you will withdraw from public affairs. You may retain your personal servants. Claudia will accompany you until she is wedded to a suitable person. You are forbidden from showing yourself in the Forum or the Senate hereafter." This is banishment cloaked in elegance, yet sufficiently secure as you desire, Caesar. Aurelia intentionally employs that title, she notes. She acknowledges him. This action costs her nothing, but grants her additional moments. Valens pauses. He says, "Should you at any point recall significant details from your husband's documents, anything overlooked amidst the turmoil, forward the information via the pontiffs, the prefect, or whichever route you prefer, ensuring it reaches me and no one else." Aurelia replies, "I comprehend." His eyes scan her countenance for any hint of rebellion. He discovers none, only weary composure. Upon his departure, Claudia whirls around to face her. "You intend to allow him to banish us?" the young woman hisses sharply. "Given his actions in true nature, we could inform the Senate and the priests. We could perish." Aurelia interrupts, "As could everyone who ever confided in us." Currently, Valens occupies the throne, and Aelianus commands the guard. For now, they are evenly matched. If you begin upsetting that equilibrium without sufficient strength on our part, we become mere corpses added to the heap. "Thus we take no action," Claudia retorts venomously. Aurelia gazes at the temple quarters seen through the window. One distinct roof catches her eye, the sanctuary where the pontifex currently possesses the folded parchment. She says, "We are not inactive. We bide our time and observe. We ensure that the knowledge of that town and those identities never fades completely. We guarantee that, should Valens or Aelianus betray us, individuals within this city will be capable of harming them in unforeseen manners." Claudia fixes her gaze on Aurelia. "How much time will that require?" "Possibly years," replies Aurelia, "or perhaps never. That is typically how Rome operates. Justice is merely a synonym for leverage. We are still breathing, and the women in this palace are also alive. That is no trivial matter following a night as harrowing as ours. She omits the remainder, that their continued existence rests upon falsehoods, compacts with murderers, the interment of certain facts, and the deliberate preservation of others. Such is the cost. She will bear it. The 72 hours conclude with a spectacle in public. Valens enters the forum with guards on either side, and the crowd cheers for their new ruler. Coins are thrown, pledges are yelled out, and the Praetorian's bonus is declared. Their cheers seem like devotion, but are actually contentment. Future official accounts will claim that Titus Flavius Valens's succession proceeded smoothly, and that Emperor Decimus Varro Marcellus succumbed to a disease. A capable general took over without disruption and re-established order. The Praetorian Guard maintained peace in Rome. History will document that the emperor's widow withdrew to a country estate and led a quiet life. It will mention that his daughter made a favorable marriage. It will omit the events within the palace during those 72 hours when the guard had access to every entrance. It will exclude the fact that a prefect nearly slashed her throat in a chamber filled with blazing documents. It won't reveal that the emperor's corpse bore secret evidence to a temple altar. It won't disclose how near the women of that family were to annihilation, or how fine the line was between living and perishing. This narrative is important, not because it alters who held the throne, but because it reveals the price of that crown for those nearby. Armed men dictated the rules during the power vacuum. Emperors composed the sanctioned account. Women experienced the space between those narratives. They suffered through terror and compelled concessions. Their survival hinged on a single man discovering a dossier. In public records, Aurelia Priscilla will only ever be remembered as the retiring widow. Her efforts over those 3 days enabled that narrative. She transformed a violent killing into a tranquil legend.